The forest in late October was the kind of quiet that made your ears ring. Leaves barely moved. The air felt trapped between the trees, and whatever sunlight tried to push through the branches came down in thin, dying rays. Aaron didn't want to go, he'd said so many times, but his two friends insisted that a last camping trip before winter was a tradition they couldn't break. So he went, even though something in his gut twisted the entire 2-hour drive. The trail they picked wasn't a real one, just a faint path long forgotten, barely cutting between pines that seemed to be leaning into them. By the time they reached the clearing, the sun had almost collapsed behind the hills. And that's when they saw it. Fire pit, already set. Stones arranged in a ring. Still fresh but cold. Aaron felt the tension rise in his throat. Guys, someone was just here. But Adam laughed it off. Relax, maybe rangers. Except rangers didn't camp this deep. Everyone knew that. Still, they set up their tent, started their own fire, and tried to pretend everything was normal. They ate, joked, and passed around a lantern as the woods swallowed the last bit of light. And for a while, Aaron convinced himself he was just overthinking. Until the footsteps started. Low. Heavy. Approaching from behind the treeline. Adam froze mid-sentence. Jake stood up, eyes darting. But the footsteps stopped the second the lantern turned toward the sound. Silence. Jake muttered. Probably a deer. He didn't believe it. None of them did. They climbed into the tent around midnight. Aaron lay closest to the door, unable to calm the pounding in his chest. The night pressed against the thin fabric of the tent like a weight, making every sound sharper, every flicker of wind colder. A zipper sound. It wasn't theirs. It wasn't close. It was right outside their tent. Low, steady, careful. Aaron's blood froze. He nudged Adam awake, but Adam shook his head violently. Don't make a sound. The zipper stopped. Silence stretched until every second felt like something scraping along Aaron's nerves. Then something. Someone pressed their palm against the tent wall, right above Aaron's head. He didn't move. Couldn't breathe. The imprint dragged slowly downward, like the person was tracing their fingers along his skull. Jake whispered, barely audible. He's checking how many of us there are. The hand withdrew. Footsteps retreated. Fast. Too fast for any animal. They didn't sleep. Not even for a second. By morning they packed up immediately, desperate to leave. But as they took down the tent, Aaron noticed something that made his mouth go dry. Next to the tent pole, pressed into the dirt, was a boot print, fresh, and facing toward their sleeping bags. They hurried down the trail, not talking, afraid their voices would summon the man back. But halfway down, Aaron stopped dead. There were footprints, following behind theirs. At least a dozen. Someone had followed them into the forest, and then stopped, right before their camp. They reported it, but rangers said the area had been closed for years and no one was supposed to be out there. No evidence. No suspect. Nothing. But Aaron swears, every night for months afterward, he heard a zipper, right outside his window. Melissa grew up camping. She knew every sound the woods made. Owls, deer, coyotes, branches falling, even the way human voices traveled differently through trees. But the scream she heard that night didn't belong to any of them. The trip was supposed to be solo, a chance to clear her head after a breakup. She picked a familiar lake, still black water surrounded by pines that rose like dark cathedral pillars. She set up her tent, cooked a simple dinner, and watched the reflection of the moon drift across the lake's surface. At around midnight, she climbed into her sleeping bag. The forest hummed with nighttime life. Crickets, wind, the occasional flap of wings. Comforting. Predictable. Then she heard it. Sharp, piercing whistle. Not musical. Not natural. Just one long, shrill note. Melissa shot upright. Came again. Closer. No rhythm. No tune. Just a whistle that felt like it was meant to get someone's attention. She unzipped her tent just enough to peek into the forest. A cold wind had moved in, sweeping through the pines with a slow, unsettling hiss. Voice. First it sounded like a man calling out. But it wasn't words. It was a strained, broken attempt to sound like words. Mimicry. Hello. Heel. Melissa's stomach churned. Every instinct screamed to stay silent. The voice came again, this time from the left, then behind her, then right outside her tent. Hello. Not human. Not quite. Melissa grabbed her flashlight and boots, ready to run if she had to. The beam of light shook in her hands as she crawled out and scanned the trees. Nothing. But the forest felt wrong. Too still. Too expectant. Then she saw it. Between two trunks about 30 feet away. Silhouette. Bent wrong at the spine. Head cocked unnaturally to one side. It swayed like it was listening to something only it could hear. Melissa didn't breathe. Then it started whistling again. Long broken. Forced. She sprinted. Branches cut her face as she tore through the woods blindly. She didn't stop until she reached the gravel road, collapsing beside the marker post. Her whole body trembled as she waited for a car to pass. But before one came, she heard the whistle again. Closer. Behind the treeline. She flagged down the first vehicle she saw, a logging truck. The driver didn't ask questions. He just told her she was lucky he came through that late. As they drove away, Melissa looked back through the window. There on the side of the road stood the silhouette, bent, listening, head tilted. The driver saw her expression and muttered, "Yeah, this forest. It has things in it we don't talk about." Melissa never camped alone again. But sometimes, late at night, she hears a whistle outside her apartment door. Jonah's nightmare started with a storm that forced him and his cousin to seek shelter. They had gone deep into the woods on a weekend hike, but by evening, thunder rolled across the sky like the forest was cracking apart. Just when they thought they were trapped in the rain, lightning flashed, revealing a cabin they swore had not been there on their way in. Rotting, leaning slightly sideways like the ground beneath it was sinking. Against their better judgment, they ran to it, desperate to escape the storm. The door groaned as they pushed it open. Inside, it smelled like wet wood and something sour hidden beneath it. But there was a fire, already lit, crackling warmly in the stone hearth. Jonah froze. Who started that? His cousin shrugged. Maybe someone left it burning. No one leaves a fire burning in a place like this. Still they sat down, warmed up, tried to laugh off how creepy everything felt. But the storm outside grew worse, wind snapping branches like bones, and soon they realized they'd have to stay the night. That was their mistake. Around 2 a.m., Jonah woke to a sound he couldn't place. A wet, dragging noise. He looked toward his cousin, but his cousin was breathing normally. Dragging again. Closer. Jonah's breath caught in his throat. He sat up slowly, and that's when he saw the shadows. Not one, not two, but 3 shapes standing in the far corner of the cabin. Perfectly still. Perfectly silent. Too dark to see their faces. Jonah shook his cousin awake. Someone's inside. But the second his cousin opened his eyes, the shadows moved. Not walking. Not turning. But shifting across the room like smoke made of bones. The fire flickered violently. Jonah grabbed his cousin's arm and ran toward the door, but when he pulled it open, the forest wasn't outside. Something else was. Something like an endless hallway of twisted trees that leaned inward, blocking the sky. The cabin wasn't in the same place anymore. Behind them, the shadows started crawling, their limbs stretching unnaturally, bending backward as they moved. Jonah slammed the door shut. The floorboards vibrated. The walls groaned. The fire dimmed until only embers remained. Then all at once everything stopped. Silence. Jonah hesitated. Then opened the door again. This time the forest was back. Normal. Silent. They sprinted without stopping. They reached their car at dawn, breathless and shaking. When they told the ranger station what happened, an older officer simply asked, "What cabin?" Jonah pointed to the map. The officer shook his head. "There's never been a cabin there. Not in my 30 years. Jonah insisted. Begged them to check. Team went out. They came back with photographs. The clearing was empty. No structure. No burned logs. No foundation. No footsteps. But the ranger pulled Jonah aside and said quietly, "Next time the forest offers you shelter, don't take it." Jonah moved states within the month. But some nights, just as he's falling asleep, he hears it again. That dragging, just outside his bedroom door.